Welcome to Crossover Commander, where we show you how to cross over your favorite pop culture characters through the blind eternities so they can command your deck with style. If you really enjoy what you see here today and would like to see this channel grow, check us out on TikTok and Patreon. The links will be in the description section down below. It looks like this portal is stabilizing, so let's get on with this show. Sephiroth was first unleashed on the world in 1997. In his debut title, Final Fantasy VII, for the PlayStation 1. The story has him as, at first, a hero of Soldier, the army of Shinra. And as the story goes, he finds himself going mad at the knowledge of his creation through the manipulation of Jenova's cells. It is at this point that he vows revenge against not only Shinra, but the human race and the planet as a whole. He then endeavors to end all life. The closer Sephiroth becomes to his mother Jenova, the original Calamity, the more he taints the life stream. And as the corruption grows, mutation ensues, and Sephiroth becomes an abomination of angelic horror. Like his mother before him, he thrusts himself through the blind eternities. I would like to present to you Sephiroth as your commander. Sephiroth and Atraxa are similar on many levels. At the beginning of their stories, they are both the heroes, and they fall to the corruption of an invading alien force. In Sephiroth's case, it's the corruption of Jenova's cells upon the planet of Gaia. In Atraxa's case, it's the Phyrexian invasion of Mirrodin. Both become abominations and horrors as the corruption of their individual worlds come to completion. Mechanically, they fit very well as well. They are both imposing figures. Atraxa has flying, vigilance, death touch, and lifelink. And at the beginning of your end step, you proliferate, which allows you to choose any number of permanents and or players, then give each another counter of each kind already there. Sephiroth stands alone in the field of victory, having been bestowed great power through his mutations caused by the reunion with his mother, Jenova. This is highlighted in the interaction of Otrimi the Ever-Playful as a mutate creature and Kestia the Cultivator as a bestow creature. Before we look at the rest of the cards, let's have a small talk about the strategy and Rule 0 for this deck. It sits at an intersection of two playstyles, those being Voltron and Value Engine, and it will fit comfortably at casually competitive tables. And to claim victory with this deck, once our Voltron Value Engine is set up, Sephiroth will be free to annihilate your opponents with commander damage. Now that we've introduced Sephiroth as our commander and gone over the strategy and the win conditions for this deck, I'd like to take this time to remind you that this is a crossover-themed build. With that being said, crucial cards for the theme will be added regardless of price. Cards that are not essential to fit the theme will be made as budget-friendly as possible. At the heart of the story of Final Fantasy VII, there is the indestructible will of Gaia and the life stream, and the corruption and destruction brought by Jenova and Sephiroth. This is even evident in the lands for this deck. We have the indestructible lands of Thornglint Bridge, Tanglepool Bridge, Darkmoss Bridge, Razortide Bridge, Mistvault Bridge, and Goldmire Bridge, as well as the Painlands, Llanowar Waste, Yavimaya Coast, and Caves of Koilos. This is to highlight the indestructible will of Gaia and the pain and destruction caused by Jenova's influence. Now, stepping outside of the theme for a second, this is a 4-color deck. With that being said, it requires a lot of colors, and a lot of colors at the right time. So we're utilizing the best multicolored lands that we can for our budget. We have Ancient Ziggurat, which adds 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to play a creature, which in this deck will work fine. Then we have Path of Ancestry. It enters tapped, but you can add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. When that mana is spent to cast a creature that shares a creature type with your commander, scry 1. Now that scry will every once in a while come up. Not all of our creatures are the same creature type, but that's okay, because we're looking for the color tap, not the scry. Then we have Grand Colosseum. It enters tapped, but you can add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, and it deals 1 damage to you. Then we have Command Tower, which adds 1 mana of any color in your commander's identity. Then we have Exotic Orchard, which adds 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. And then we have Aether Hub. When Aether Hub enters the battlefield, you get an energy counter. Add generic mana to your mana pool, or you can tap, pay an energy counter, and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Now, in most decks, this just doesn't function at all. However, the Proliferate mechanic allows this to be a viable land in this deck. Then we have Myriad Landscape, which allows you to pay 2 and sacrifice it to search your library for up to 2 basic lands that share a land type, and then you move those to the battlefield tapped. And then Croson Verge allows you to essentially do the same thing, but to find a forest and a plains card specifically. The ramp and color fixing that these 2 lands will provide is essential for this deck. In the last section of this mana base, we will be taking full advantage of the Proliferate mechanic that Sephiroth allows us in using Tendo Icebridge, Calciform Pools, Salt-Crusted Steps, Dreadship Reef, Mirrodin's Core, and Majoring Network. All of these have counters that either come on them or they can be placed on them and then proliferated again and again and again to either add color fixing in the case of Tendo Icebridge and Mirrodin's Core, or straight ramp in the case of Calciform Pools, Salt-Crusted Steps, Dreadship Reef, and Majoring Network. The storage counters on those 4 lands specifically, when you proliferate them, will allow you to save up mana, essentially, and then in 1 turn, tap it for all of the mana that's saved up, and play some big splashy spell. To finish off the mana base, we have 4 forests, 4 swamps, 3 plains, and 3 islands. Sephiroth bends to his will, the flow of the life stream, and this gives him immeasurable power. This is evident in our ramp package, starting with Zendikar Resurgent. It says, whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land produced. And then it also says, whenever you cast a creature spell, you draw a card. This will double up our mana and allow us some great incidental draw. And then the Pyramid of the Pantheon works with the Proliferate mechanic. You can put a brick counter on it and tap it for any color. Or if it has 3 brick counters on it, you can tap it for 3 mana of any color. And then Gyre Sage has the Evolve mechanic, which will allow it to get bigger with +1/+1 counters and tap for as much mana as it has +1/+1 counters. And then Fertilid enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. You can pay 1 and a green to remove a +1/+1 counter and search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Now this has a hidden synergy later on in the deck that we'll get more to later. Then there's Astral Cornucopia. You can pay 3 mana for this card and it gains 1 charge counter, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color for each charge counter on it. Now this can proliferate with our commander's ability and gain us even more mana over the long term. Pentad Prism works very similarly. You just have to keep maintaining that prism counter on it. And then Soul Ring is great. It just gives you 2 mana every single time. And then Migratory Greathorn will allow us to search for a land every time we mutate, which we will be doing a lot of in this deck, and we will be removing our basic lands very quickly. Jenova's legacy is the corruption she left behind. It seeps its way into the life stream and infects every living being on Gaia, and allows Sephiroth to bend these creatures to his will. This is shown in our deck by the mutate mechanic. We have some mutate payoff cards to start with. We have Essence Symbiote, which says whenever a creature you control mutates, put a 1/1 counter on that creature and you gain 2 life. Then we have Polywog Symbiote, and it says each creature spell you cast costs 1 less to cast if it has mutate. Whenever you cast a creature spell, if it has mutate, draw a card, then discard a card. This is some great draw due to the fact that most of our creatures have mutate. And then we come to Parcel Beast. Now, before we go much further, I want to give a little FYI. We are going to try, at every cost possible, to play these creatures for their mutate cost only. Only on the rarest occasions will you cast it for its actual mana cost. Now going forward, for 1 green and 1 blue, Parcel Beast will attach to our commander and give us the ability of pay 1 and tap, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield. If it's not a land card, you may put it into your hand. This is some great ramp and some great card draw. Then we have Sea Dasher Octopus, which will give us more card draw because it says whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, and you mutate that with 1 and a blue. Then we have Gem Razor. For 1 and 2 green, you can mutate this creature. It'll give us Reach and Trample on Sephiroth. And it says whenever this creature mutates, destroy target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. And then we have Vulpikeet. And for 2 and a white, it will give Sephiroth the redundant ability of flying, as well as an extra +1/+1 counter whenever it mutates. And then we have Insatiable Hemophage for 2 and a black. It'll give us the redundant keyword of Death Touch, but also the ability whenever this creature mutates, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life. X is the number of times this creature is mutated. And then we have Sawtusk Demolisher that will give our commander Trample for 3 and 1 green, and the ability of whenever this creature mutates, destroy target non-creature permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. Between Gem Razor and Sawtusk Demolisher, we will be able to deal with any threat our opponent throws at us, whether it's an enchantment, planeswalker, artifact, you name it. We have Cavern Whisperer for 3 and 1 black. It'll give Sephiroth Menace, which is some excellent evasion. And it also gives the ability whenever this creature mutates, each opponent discards a card. Then we have Dreamtail Heron for 3 and a blue. It'll give us the redundant ability of flying, as well as whenever this creature mutates, draw a card. And then Pouncing Shore Shark for 3 and a blue. It says whenever this creature mutates, you may return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand, and you can play it at instant speed with the flash. And then we have Necropanther for 2, and then 2 Orzhov, which is white or black. It says whenever this creature mutates, return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. This will help if, say, we get wiped or killed or bounced or whatever, and some of our stuff ends up in the graveyard, we can recur it with that. Otrami from the first slide is also great for that. And then we have Majestic Auricorn, and it, for 3 and 1 white, will give our commander the redundant ability of Vigilance, as well as whenever this creature mutates, you gain 4 life. And then Glowstone Recluse for 3 and a green will give us Reach, as well as whenever this creature mutates, put 2 1/1 counters on it. And then Boneyard Lurker for 2, and then 2 Golgari. Whenever this creature mutates, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. Again, like Necropanther and Otrami, this will help in the event that Sephiroth is removed or something happens. And then Chittering Harvester for 4 and a black says whenever this creature mutates, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Then we have Trumpeting Gnar for 3 and 2 Simic, that's a green or a blue. Whenever this creature mutates, create a 3/3 green beast creature token. Then we have Brokos, Apex of Forever, for 2, a Dimir, which is black or blue, and then a green. We have Trample, and you may cast Brokos Apex of Forever from your graveyard using its mutate ability. So at any time, we can use this for an additional power and toughness boost if it's been sent to the graveyard already. And then we have Mind Leecher for 4 and a black. It'll give us the redundant ability of flying, but also the ability of whenever this creature mutates, exile the top card of each opponent's library face down. You may look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. With the fact that we are only missing red as our color identity, we'll be able to play most spells that get pulled this way, and this will give us some great incidental advantage over our opponents. Then we have Dirgebat for 4 and 2 black. It has flash and flying, and whenever this creature mutates, destroy target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. Yet another way to deal with pesky permanents. Then we have Archipelago for 5 and a blue. It says whenever this creature mutates, tap up to X target creatures, where X is the number of times this creature has mutated. These creatures don't untap during their controller's next untap step. This is almost a board wipe in this deck. We can end up locking down our opponent's permanents to the point where they're not going to be useful, and by the time they're able to be useful again, we've gotten rid of them with a different mutate effect. It's very nice for locking down the board. Then we've got Souvenir Snatcher for 5 and a blue. It will allow us to steal our opponent's non-creature artifacts. So if they've got an extra Soul Ring or a pesky artifact that would be really nice on our side of the board, we can just take it from them. And then at the top end of our mutations, we've got Nethroi, Apex of Death. It gives us the redundant abilities of Death Touch and Lifelink for 4, a Selesnya, which is white or green, and 2 black. But it also says whenever this creature mutates, return any number of target creature cards with total power 10 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So what can happen here is if we've had Sephiroth removed a couple of times and we're just trying to gain back advantage, we can toss Sephiroth in the graveyard if we've got Nethroi out and mutate a different type of creature or something like that, or mutate a different creature onto Nethroi and just pull him directly out of the graveyard instead of having to pay commander tax. Now, these effects have gotten increasingly more powerful as we prepare for the coming Cataclysm. It is with Cataclysmic Revelation that we use all of our mana to sink into these X spells. We start with Drown in Dreams. Choose one if you control a commander. As you cast this spell, you may choose both. Target player draws X cards, and target player mills twice X cards. So with all of the mana that we can get from our storage lands and our Astral Cornucopia and all of the other ramp that we have in here, we can dump serious mana into this spell and get us a bunch of cards as well as mill our opponent out. We can do the same with Blue Sun Zenith, as well as Damnable Pact. The difference here with Damnable Pact is that you lose life equal to the amount that X is as well, so it can be a kill spell for our opponents. Then we have Dread Summons. It says each player mills X cards. For each creature card put into a graveyard this way, you create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. Now, with all of our recursion that we have, we can actually do this and not have much downside because we can just recur the creatures back out of our graveyard on our end. Now, our opponents are going to get hit with this pretty bad, and then plus we're going to get a huge board state from it. Then we have Finale of Revelation. It says draw X cards if X is 10 or more. Instead, shuffle your graveyard into your library. Draw X cards, untap up to 5 lands, and you have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. Then you exile Finale of Revelation. And then we have Finale of Eternity. It says destroy up to 3 target creatures with toughness X or less. If X is 10 or more, return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. See, if we do a huge Dread Summons and dump a good portion of creatures in our graveyard, both Finale of Revelation and Finale of Eternity can bring all those cards back into play. Now that the Hour of Reckoning is upon us, we must make sure Sephiroth cannot be stopped. To that end, we employ Giant's Amulet, which says equipped creature gets +0/+1 and this creature has hexproof as long as it's untapped. Sephiroth has Vigilance, so he will always be untapped. Curator's Ward, enchant permanent, has hexproof. When enchanted permanent leaves the battlefield, if it was historic, you draw 2 cards. So if he gets dealt with, we get a benefit. And then Alpha Authority, enchant creature. Enchanted creature has hexproof and can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. And then Swiftfoot Boots, equipped creature has hexproof and haste. Now these are all great to keep our commander on the battlefield. But if he somehow gets dealt with Journey to Eternity equipped, he will immediately come back, and then Journey to Eternity will come back as a land, which can either ramp us, or act as a permanent form of recursion in the form of Atzal Cave of Eternity. Then we have Ghostblade Eidolon for 5 and a white, 6 mana in total. It'll give Sephiroth double strike, meaning that he can end the game very quickly. It also gives him a +1/+1. That's a nice bonus. And then Noble Quarry for 5 and a green. All creatures able to block Noble Quarry or enchanted creature do so. Now, it also gives +1/+1, but this is very interesting because if you combo it with Alpha Authority, it basically gives him unblockable. Because Alpha Authority says can't be blocked by more than 1 creature, and Noble Quarry says all available creatures must block him. It's kind of interesting. Then we have Hour of Promise. Now you might be wondering how Hour of Promise fits in this section. And that'll come up in the next slide. But Hour of Promise says search your library for up to 2 land cards. Note that it doesn't say basic land. And then it says put them onto the battlefield tapped. Then you shuffle your library. Now that the reunion with Jenova is complete, Sephiroth will be looked upon as an indestructible god, as he always should have been. To that end, we have Tyrite Sanctum, which is the land we'd search for with Hour of Promise. It says, tap and add a colorless, or pay 2 colorless, tap target legendary creature becomes a god in addition to its other types, and put 1/1 counter on it. And then 4, tap and sacrifice the Tyrite Sanctum, put an indestructible counter on target god. This is a very flavorful way to give Sephiroth indestructible. And then we move on to Shielded by Faith. With his faith in Jenova realized, he becomes indestructible. And whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you may attach Shielded by Faith to that creature, but we're not going to worry about that because it's going to stay on Sephiroth. And then we have Indestructibility. Simple. Enchanted Permanent has Indestructible. Then we have Darksteel Plate, which is indestructible itself, which is important for a combo coming up. And then Equipped Creature has Indestructible, equip cost of 2. Then we have Gift of Doom. Enchanted Creature has Death Touch and Indestructible. And we can sometimes use the Morph trigger to kind of surprise an opponent, but that's not really what we're concerned about. Then we have Avison's Memorial. It is indestructible, and other legendary permanents you control have indestructible. And then we have Cauldra Complete. It's a living weapon for 7 mana. It is indestructible itself, and when it equips to a creature, the creature gets +5/+5, has First Strike, Trample, Indestructible, Haste, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a creature, exile that creature. This is such an awesome card in this deck. It will make Sephiroth an absolute monster on the battlefield. And then we have Shield of the Oversoul. Enchant creature. As long as the enchanted creature is green, it gets a +1/+1 and is indestructible. And as long as it's a white creature, it gets +1/+1 and flying. Sephiroth is both, so he will get both of those, giving him a total of +2/+2, indestructible and flying. The flying's redundant, but that is okay. This card is still great. To end Sephiroth's deck, as well as his opponents, we have Doomsday. It says, for 3 black mana, search your library and graveyard for 5 cards of your choice and remove the rest from the game. Put the chosen cards on the top of your library in any order you choose. You lose half your life rounded up. Not only does this thematically fit the deck, because Sephiroth causes Doomsday, but it will work to get any of our win conditions right in a nice, neat little package for us to use. It's also very risky, because they can mill you out, they can do a couple of things with your library at that point, and you could lose. But Sephiroth summoned a meteor to destroy the planet that he was standing on, after all. So, I think he's okay with a little risk. Then we have Diabolic Revelation. For X, 3, and 2 black, you can search your library for up to X cards and put those cards into your hand, then shuffle the library. This will be able to find anything we need, and we will have the mana to find multiple cards if need be as well. And then Jenova's final plan for Sephiroth in Pheresis and Corrupted Conscience. It will allow Sephiroth to have Infect, which will close out the game almost instantly. Then we have Decimator Web. For 4, tap, target opponent loses 2 life, gets a poison counter, then puts the top 6 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. This is another way that we can end the game with poison counters due to proliferation. It's not quite as immediate as Pheresis and Corrupted Consciousness, but it can still work in a pinch. Then we have Darksteel Reactor. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a charge counter on Darksteel Reactor. When Darksteel Reactor has 20 or more counters, you win the game. Oh, and it's indestructible, which means that with Sephiroth out on the battlefield, we can proliferate these counters and get 2 per turn and end the game in very quick order. And then, for our final card, we have Sephiroth Sword. Now, in Final Fantasy, that's called the Masamune, but in this deck, we're using the World Slayer. And this is why it was so important to make sure Sephiroth became indestructible. The way that Mutate works is the creatures that you played the Mutate cost for become part of the creature they mutated on. So as long as we can give Sephiroth indestructible, all of those benefits stay on him as well. And then in the case of World Slayer, we can swing and completely demolish everyone else's board while leaving ours more or less intact. We will lose lands, sure, but also not all of our lands, because we have the artifact dual lands that are also indestructible. This is the game clincher. Now that we've looked at all the cards in Sephiroth's deck, it's time to look at the average price. At the time of release, it's between $90 and $170 depending on where you purchase from, and as always, it can be cheaper if you don't mind playing with damaged cards. And then looking at the stats, we have 16 ramp cards, which is amazing. We will be able to pump out some massive spells in this deck. And then for tutors, we only technically have one, and that's the Diabolic Revelation. However, we have a lot of graveyard interaction and a lot of stuff that we can continually bring out of our graveyard, and to that effect, it's one-ish. And then we have 10 card draw spells, and then we have 11 pieces of interaction, which is going to be able to deal with anything, because a lot of this interaction is repeatable. Which is why, when it comes to board wipes, we only have 2-ish. And I say 2-ish because technically the only full board wipe is World Slayer. The only partial board wipe is Archipelago. And then we have 38 lands to round out this deck. Remember, this is a crossover themed build. With that being said, crucial cards for the theme were added regardless of price. Cards that were not essential to fit the theme were made as budget-friendly as possible. If you want to optimize this list, feel free to leave your upgrades in the comments section below. Most importantly, this deck is meant to be a new and engaging way to spice up your Commander games, so fun is the top priority. Thank you for watching this crossover deck tech. If you liked this video, check out our other content on YouTube or TikTok. Your viewership means the multiverse to the crossover commander, and if you would like to become a part of this growing Terran reality, you can like, share, and subscribe. If you would like to vote on the next pop culture character to crossover, check out our Patreon, where we have some awesome perks. If you have any ideas or complaints, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. Now that this portal's closing, see you next time.